All right. So again, thank you so much for those who are joining us today. And if you haven't already, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the poll that we've got going on. We thank everyone for providing those answers, and it just gives us a better idea of who's here, what you guys are hoping to learn about today. And we just hope that it's going to be a fruitful time for discussion with what we're discussing today. So as we begin, this is part of Sharefaith Academy, which is our Sharefaith webinar service, and we do all kinds of different trainings and programs. We'll talk a little bit more about who we are as we get into it. To begin with, I just want to welcome everybody for coming, and just thank you so much for joining us here on your Tuesday, spending some time with us. We'll have about an hour here that we're discussing different marketing platforms and strategies, and a breakdown of different essentially procedures as we go through the marketing process, planning stages, and so forth. So as we begin, I would just go ahead and like to start things off with prayer, make sure we're starting things off the right way. So, Father God, we thank you so much for this time today, and we pray that this discussion of church marketing, Lord, that it be about your people, about reaching the lost, about edifying the believers in the church, Lord. And Father, we just ask that those of us joining today would be edified by this time, that it would be a fruitful time, and that we could all just learn more together and improve our status here in this world as a light to the lost, so that they can come find you, Lord, and know you. We thank you, and we lift this time up to you in Jesus' name. Amen. So once again, thank you so much for coming today. I've had my coffee, and I'm really excited to talk about this presentation. I do apologize. I know some folks have been waiting for quite a while to do this. A couple weeks ago, we were supposed to launch this for you, and I did have an unexpected but delightful situation where my daughter came a little bit early, about 3 months early actually, but she's doing great. She was born on September 27th and has been doing fantastic, and so we're just so thankful for her. Just a little bit about ourselves here. I just wanted to introduce myself and my associate who are here with you in today's webinar. This handsome-looking guy here is me. And by the way, if you don't see these slides clearly, I just want to let you know ahead of time, we will be providing a PDF of the slides available to you, along with a special ebook for those who are attending through the end to make sure that you get that. So we do want you to stick around, make sure you get to hear all the good stuff that we're going to talk about, and we'll have some special things for you at the end of it. So my name is Zach Merritt, and I am one of the guys here who works in our product outreach and marketing division here at Sharefaith. And then along with me today, I have the magnificent, marvelous, and anything but mediocre Mr. Mark McComas. And the alliteration jokes will never get old. So Mark is joining us today too, and he'll be working with you guys. So as you have questions or discussions throughout the webinar, feel free to communicate with us, and Mark will do his best with his fingers flying, because we have a pretty big crowd today, which we're very excited about. And he will be doing his best to communicate that to you. At the end of things, we'll take some of our favorite discussion points and questions that you folks want to bring up and discuss those at the end to try and help answer any questions that you have too. So we do have a lot to talk about though, so we do want to go ahead and get started. First of all, looking at what we're going to be discussing with church marketing, really with church marketing, I want to say when we say church marketing, it kind of sounds like a strange term to use in the kingdom of God. But what we're really talking about is outreach and discipleship. And one other point I want to make too, if you haven't already, most of you, or if not all of you, should have gotten a downloadable workbook that you could print out and follow along with this. Again, if you would like, we'll definitely send out additional copies. So if anybody wants to review this webinar later, they can make those extra notes. And we'll also have a video recording of the webinar made available to you afterwards as well. And we'll get all this to you within 24 hours from the time we finish here. So again, though, we do want you to stick around just to make sure you get some good stuff that we're going to have available at the end. So continuing on, I want to talk about you and why you're here. So for those of you who are watching this, I think there's essentially maybe about one of three different types of people who are visiting with us today. So you're either looking to build a marketing platform for your church, and you want to know where to start. And I think that's going to be a lot of you today. And I know personally a lot of churches are really in this struggle, kind of transitioning over to what today's resources have available and want to learn more about how they can capitalize on those. The other person might be taking over church marketing for your church. Perhaps it's already established, but you want to do an overhaul and get some new marketing platforms built for yourself to really enhance the way that your church communicates. And the third person I think we have is somebody who's already satisfied with what they have, but they're interested in finding ways to enhance them. And so I hope that even those folks today will be able to learn something and get some more information about different platforms and strategies that they can make use of in their own church. So in the style of marketing, we are going to go ahead and break our sections down essentially into the 4 P's of church marketing. And if you're familiar with business marketing at all, they have what they call the 4 P's of business marketing. These are not the same 4 P's. I want to make sure that we establish early on there is significantly a difference between what church marketing is versus business marketing. And the first P that we'll look at is really going to help solidify that concept, and that is perspective. So beginning with it, we're going to look at how our perspective of church marketing will shape our strategies and the way that we carry out our plans from there. Speaking of plans, the second part is the planning stage. I know that a lot of this we're going to be talking about planning and putting stuff together, but planning is in itself a very important part of things, because you don't want to just go out guns blazing with all sorts of different things and waste your time with fruitless pursuits in terms of what is actually going to benefit your church. So planning is very important. Continuing on, platform. And we should really say platforms. We're going to look at all the different platforms that are really beneficial to churches in all sorts of different stages, but looking at how you use them and which ones are really worth looking into. And then finally, progress. So once we get past the point of having a platform, doing our planning and everything, looking at our progress and how we're tracking it and moving forward with the decisions that we have in our marketing. So to begin with, I want to break down and ask you guys some questions about perspective. And the first one might seem a little strange, but talking about perspective and talking about it in church marketing, one of the first questions I want you to ask yourself is, what's your current relationship status with Jesus? That's kind of a weird question to see in a webinar, right? But the reality is we want to make sure that we're starting off on a good point and we have a solid relationship with Jesus. You see, marketing in the church, we kind of look at it as a business position or an executive position. We don't necessarily see it as a ministry all the time, but it couldn't be further from the truth. As we get into it, I want you to have this feeling that marketing is perhaps one of the most important ministries in your church organization today. And I want you to feel that you have a good, solid foundation with Jesus as you begin this, because you're about to go into the front lines of the battle with your church and reaching the lost for Jesus. So I want to make sure you've got your good war shoes on, because you're about to get into some spiritual warfare, and we'll continue on. Secondly, I want to ask the question, what church marketing is to you. I kind of talked about it a little bit before as to what I feel church marketing is, but church marketing to me is a form of outreach and discipleship together. It's communication with both your church inside the church, the congregation that you have, and also the world at large. So church marketing is, as I said, it's a ministry aspect of communication and making sure that all the pieces are working together as they should. Also, I want you to ask yourself what the church is to you. The church is not a business. It's not just a nonprofit organization, although legally, you might have to write that down and fill out some stuff for that. But the reality is that the church is the bride of Christ. It's the kingdom of God, and it's something that needs to be edified. So what you're doing in your marketing position, remember that you are representing the church when you do it. It's a bit weighty, but at the same time, it's exciting because it gives you the opportunity to frontline as one of the main spokespersons for your church and for Jesus. So I hope that this is exciting you as we're looking into it, and you're really gathering how much of a ministry it is doing what you do going forward in this. Next, I want you to think about who you hope to impact through your marketing efforts. So, of course, most churches will want to just try and get everybody, right? And that's great. That's a good goal, to try and reach everyone in your community. But you have to think about what the ministries are that you have, what the facilities are like that you have, what do you have access to, or what can you gain access to that will directly impact others. Perhaps your church is maybe a little bit more geared towards youth, or maybe do you have a recovery ministry that you sponsor? Or whatever the case may be, you might find that you have a special demographic that your church already directly ministers and influences. And it's a great thing to start with and pursue from there. And then from that point on, you can look at the areas that you need to improve and see where do you want to expand from there, and how do you want to further the reach that the gospel has from your church. And then finally, I want you to ask what the ultimate goal is. Now, the ultimate goal with being in church marketing should never be about money. It shouldn't just be about growing the numbers. I mean, yes, those are good things, and we do need them to an extent. But the reality is that the ultimate goal is to work so that you can point those outside of your church to Jesus so that they can come to know him, and those who are in your church to grow in their relationship with Jesus and be further built and edified. So I hope that starting off with these questions of perspective really opens things up for you so you can see how important this is, what a wonderful opportunity is that you're given if you're starting out with this type of situation. And again, I just hope that as we continue on, you'll find more fruitful options that are going to be available to you. So continuing forward, I want to go ahead and jump into the planning stages. So with planning, I feel that the first thing you really should do is just take a look at what you already have and who you already have at your disposal. It's just like I think of the parable when Jesus was talking to the people and said, who of you looks to build a tower but doesn't sit down and count the cost before? Obviously, Jesus is talking about discipleship in that aspect, but likewise, we need to look at that with church marketing. What do we already have at our disposal, and what do we want to do? What are going to be the costs going forward in getting things ready? And I want you to think about these things to ask about, especially if you're somebody who perhaps is new at your church, who's taking over these responsibilities, or you haven't really done an account of these things, recently. Looking at it, talk about what are your current ministries for outreach and discipleship. Look at those. Do you have a church website? Are you using social media at all? Do you have a mobile app? Are you using any sort of print handouts in the church? Do you have any new visitor materials for when people come to visit your church? Do you have an email list so that you can communicate with people with their email addresses? Also, things like a church directory can be helpful so you have information about the folks who are at your church. So these are good things to make an account of, and there may be more that you can think of as well, but these are good starting points to begin with. And also I mentioned, who do you have at your disposal? So when you're planning, now some of you may be doing this solo, and that's fine if you're going and getting started on this on your own. I know plenty of churches around my area who I've talked to and worked with who are in that kind of position. But eventually, you'll really want to start looking for opportunities that you can bring other people in. So let's talk about responsibilities, and you want to assign and discuss roles. Some of you are working with teams, or you have people in mind that you want to enlist for this. That's perfect. And you'll also want to make sure that as you find areas that you realize are perhaps outside of your scope of comfortability, that you don't think that you can move forward in, or that someone else can do better in, that's fine. It's okay to admit things like that. And you want to find opportunities to recruit volunteers and then possibly even staff, depending on your situation, as necessary. And then with those people, it's always good to plan a brainstorm session. So get together with them, have a meeting, maybe 2, maybe 3, and talk about the things that you want to do to help revolutionize the way that your church communicates with everyone involved. All right, moving forward, let's talk about timing. So timing is also an important thing. It's great to have an idea of what you want and who you want to do it, but you have to have a schedule in place as to when things are going to get done to help you move forward. So think about what order you want things to happen in, prioritize things according to their importance or their accessibility. Different things you might find are easier and quicker and cheaper to go ahead and get started first, and that's great. But also think of them in the scope of the big picture and make sure that you're still thinking of other things that will take longer to set up possibly, or might require a bit more cost, but have goals in place to get those done and set deadlines for yourself that you know are attainable. And that's the next point I want to make, is setting realistic deadlines. And I want to encourage that word, emphasize that word, realistic. Sometimes we kind of just jump into things and think of like, oh yeah, a church website, sure, we'll get something like that up. Just give me about a week. That's possible, but it's not necessarily the most realistic deadline to get something like that, a whole new platform built. And depending on your situation, you might have something to work with that you're just looking to change up, or you may be looking to build something up from the ground. So however that situation is, you need to look at it realistically and set deadlines that are attainable. And sometimes you need to be a little flexible with those as well. So that's an important part of the planning stage as well. Coordinating schedules. So if you're doing this with multiple people, make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, as we talked about with assigning roles and responsibilities, but also figure out what works with their schedules. A lot of times you'll find that you're working with volunteers who have full-time jobs, kids, everything else, and that's keeping them from being able to devote all of their time and effort into something like this. So you want to coordinate with their schedule so that they don't get burned out, and so that way you're working together and not against each other. You don't want to make sure that it's clearly understood, who's in charge of what, so you don't have multiple people both trying to pursue different roads to get the same place, because otherwise you're going to find conflict, frustration, and everything else that goes with that. So you just want to make sure that you're setting realistic deadlines and coordinating schedules with other people to make sure that you're working with them and they're working well together to make this happen. And when you're advertising events, I can't stress this enough because I've seen this happen too many times. Give yourself plenty of advance notice to your church and to anybody else if you're going to publicly advertise or anything like that, so that, like, for example, if you're doing an event, right now it's October, some of you might be having harvest festivals coming up, or you're getting ready to plan for Thanksgiving, or even some of you are getting ready to plan for Christmas stuff. So you want to make sure that you have the right mindset of when to start telling people about that, and you've got enough time for everything to happen so that you've got all of your resources lined up and how that's going to work. You've got all your volunteer needs met. So you need to make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to get the word out and make sure that things go through all right. All right, and then from there, next part of planning, I'm sure this is everyone's favorite subject, budget. I can't tell you how much I hate to work with budgets, and I'm the most frugal person ever. I will do anything to try and get free stuff for our church. I'm sure many of you have been in that situation, because I hate spending the church's money if I can find any way around it. And that's a good thing. You know, we want to be good stewards of the finances of the church, but sometimes we have to be realistic and understand that money needs to be spent in certain areas. So that's a good thing to figure out and determine where money needs to be spent. So you might see that as, there are certain platforms that you're looking at, and some may be more expensive than others, or you're going to have to save up for a long time to get there. And that's fine. That's good to have those goals in place. But think about what needs to happen at the stage that you're at with your marketing platform and what needs to get up now. And that comes with the prioritizing what order things are going to happen in, and determine what the budget really needs to look like. Be sure that you're spending enough time researching and shopping around to find what's going to work for you, and look at what the different platforms do and what their costs are going to look like. And then in the planning phase also, I want to make sure that you are planning in phases. So don't try to throw everything out all at once. As we mentioned, you want to prioritize your projects so that everything's working together. But you need to determine stages for beforehand, during the actual, whatever it is, if it's an event that you're running, if you're building a website or something like that, you need to determine what those stages look like, and then also afterwards. So you might find that you want to go ahead and get a social media page up and running, a website up and running, announce that you're having a big church event coming up. So you have to figure out what needs to happen when, and figure out the stages that needs to happen in. And you need to break it up so that way you're not trying to do everything all at once and find yourself scatterbrained with what's happening. Because I know that can happen to a lot of people where they try to do too much all at once and they don't really think of it in stages. The other thing about this is that you want to make sure that you're thinking of both short-term and long-term goals and projections. So you want to make sure that, if you're getting your website up, perhaps the first stages are just to get it up and get all the proper information about the church, that someone comes to it, they can learn more. And then if you have other goals of what to do with the website, such as broadcasting your sermons through it, adding a blog to the website, building a mobile app, that's good too, but you want to make sure that you have that initial foundation laid in the platform before you continue on and build out from there, and break it up into phases that are, again, working with schedules and realistic in your deadlines for those. So the planning stages, we want to make sure we have all these things lined up and ready to go as you're going through it. And the next part we're going to get into are the actual platforms that you're going to want to look at getting involved. And now with platforms, there's so many possibilities to look at. I decided to go ahead and break them up into 3 distinct types. If you can see the screen here at all, essentially there's 3 types that I break it down to. There's human platform, which I'll explain here just a little bit. There's your digital platforms, which are really the majority of what you're looking at nowadays. And then there's the print platform, which might seem a little strange, but we'll get into that so we can discuss how important that still is in today. So let's look at the human platform. Human platform is kind of an interesting term. I kind of wanted to try and find something that symbolized the different types of ways that humans can interact with each other and market for your church. Now, first of all, you have your pastors and church elders. Obviously, your cornerstone of your church, if you will, people who are teaching and leading in that aspect. And they can do platforming for you. They can do marketing for you through all different ways. They can preach, they can lead in worship, They can do one-on-one discipleship. These are things that you don't necessarily think of as marketing, but it's a way of communication so that others know what's happening in your church. And I know for experience with my church too, sometimes people aren't checking all the other avenues, and the only way they actually even hear that something's happening in the church is if the pastor will go up and say something about it during his sermon on a Sunday. So you have to keep those things in mind and not lose sight of how important that is in terms of communication. Also, you've got your very own congregation too, whether they're evangelizing, as some people in your congregation might be going out and street witnessing or anything like that, or if they're even just inviting friends or family or coworkers to church. It's all a form of marketing, and you don't want to lose sight of how important these are, because these relationships are really going to be the biggest factor in your attendance and people staying. And really, the human platform, I feel like, is in many cases, it can both be the beginning stage if somebody's just coming and they hear the message, or they are greeted warmly by somebody that's there, but it can also be the end stage. So if you have digital platforms that are out there, somebody sees your website or runs across your Facebook page or something like that, when they come in, then they're going to interact with people, and that's at the point that they're most likely going to decide whether or not they want to stay. So even things like having a greeter who's really warm and welcoming can be a big difference for you. I know I've talked with people who've said that the moment they decided to stay at a church was when they walked through the door and how they were greeted and welcomed by somebody. They just felt like they were already part of a family, and that was one of the biggest decisions for them in becoming a part of that church. So let's not lose sight of that as we carry forward with the rest of this. So now I want to go ahead and talk about digital platforms. And digital platforms are really becoming today's go-to way of spreading the word and doing widespread communication, because digital technology is everywhere. Everyone has, just about everyone nowadays has a smartphone or tablet, the computer. People are on the internet constantly. So there's tons of digital noise out there, and you want to make sure that you have a space that you can break through it and communicate what you need to communicate to those who you're trying to reach. And the nice thing about the digital platforms is that there's such a broad variety of them, and we're going to spend some time looking at different ones and kind of showing you what their pros and cons are and how to more effectively use them, because when you look at it, there's going to be so much available to you. One of the biggest things I hope you get out of this is really seeing what's going to be worth your while and how to approach it. So the first thing I want to talk about in digital platforms is social media. And I want to bring it up first because social media is one of the easiest things that you can get into, but it's also one of the most maintenance required, I guess you could say. There's lots of consistency that you need in social media. So we'll look at different platforms that are really the ones that are worth your attention here. So the first one I want to bring up is Facebook. Obviously, if you've been anywhere in the past few years, you've probably heard of Facebook. And with over 1 billion users worldwide, it's easily the king of social media in today's age. And I would say this is the most important form of social media that you want to get, because the majority of the people that you're trying to reach inside your congregation and out are on Facebook. And next one that people are really familiar with is Twitter. So Twitter is becoming very popular. You don't necessarily always see churches using it as much, but Twitter does definitely have a place. And with Twitter, it's great because you can do quick little updates and put things in the feed, and people can retweet them and be able to share stuff, but you are limited a little bit in what you say. So you'll see Twitter a lot of times used for quotes, perhaps for short announcements, things like that. But Twitter pages are an important thing to have as a church too and make use of, and not necessarily everybody is using them. Also, another one that's kind of come out, I wouldn't say come out of nowhere because people have known about it for years, but it has actually grown exponentially, is Instagram. Now, churches using Instagram might be kind of weird to a lot of folks, essentially because it's a mobile platform for the most part. Works through smartphones and tablets, and it's a picture sharing social site. But Instagram has actually grown to surpass Twitter in the amount of users. Instagram now has over 400 million users worldwide and is now the second largest social media site in the world. So Instagram is an important thing to establish presence in as well. And a lot of churches are actually using Instagram in a lot of great ways. They're either sharing pictures of things from events or sharing pictures of perhaps their services, taking a picture of the worship or the pastor teaching. They can also share graphics, like if you have sermon series graphics, or perhaps you're creating an announcement about something happening like upcoming youth camp or whatever it could be, then with that, you can use Instagram as a means to cut through that as well. And then also I want to bring up, not everybody always thinks of these as social sites, but YouTube and Vimeo, which are essentially your video hosting websites. And these are also becoming increasingly popular with churches because you can post things like sermon recordings. Some churches post kind of messages about themselves, or like an announcement, or almost kind of like an advertisement with a welcome, or just talking about what the church is about. So there's different ways that you can use sites like these as well, and then be able to share those through other social media channels on your website, whatever, so that people can see those too. And then this one I have as an honorable mention. It's a fairly new website that's come around, and it's called Periscope. And Periscope is a great social live streaming solution. So it's really neat. It works through the app that they've developed for Periscope, and you can literally just set up an iPhone or a tablet or something, and be able to record, say, a service, or if the pastor wants to perhaps do like a live Q&A or a live devotion of some kind, you can create a Periscope account for yourself and be able to broadcast to any number of users. And it's very neat. It allows people to promote it and share it. And again, you can save the recordings to be posted on YouTube or Vimeo later that people can then check out. So that's something that it's fairly new, but it's really starting to take off. And I think it's something that the church should really pay attention to as a new viable marketing platform that's coming out. So now let's talk a little bit more about the different social media platforms and how to use them. So first of all, I want to mention posting often. The reason for this is because you're going to find yourself fighting through a lot of noise. When you're not posting often, there's a chance that you're going to be drowned out by other people sharing funny cat videos or memes or pictures of their kids. And to be honest, I'm totally that guy. I am the guy that will share pictures of my kids. You will be drowned out with all the adorable pictures of my children, which they're right here as you can see them. This is my oldest, Addison, and then my son, Lincoln, in the middle. And that's our newest addition, Emmeline, who is the reason why you guys had to wait till today to see this. But I just have to be a proud daddy and brag on my kids for a little bit. So anyways, back to the discussion at hand, though. You want to make sure that you're posting often. And then also, you want to make sure that you're engaging your audience. So what you post is just as important as how often you post, because you can post tons of stuff that nobody cares about, and that's not going to do you any good. It's not going to gain any traction. Nobody's going to like it or share it. You're not going to get any visibility that way. But if you make sure that you're thoughtful with what you post, and again, it could be something like perhaps a picture from the service, or maybe a quote from your pastor, or perhaps a scripture verse even. And there's all kinds of different ways that you can approach it. But you have to think about what platform you're using. So like, for example, if you're doing Instagram, it's going to have to be a picture or even a video of some kind. So that's going to be a strictly visual approach there. With Facebook, you can do text or images. And then with Twitter, most of the time you're kind of limited to text, but you can share links through it. So you just kind of have to work within your platform and see what's going to be beneficial. And it's fun to try stuff out, throw different things out there throughout the week. With posting often, I would say you want to make sure you're doing it, and this might scare some people, multiple times a day. With Facebook, I would say probably it's good to do 2 to 4 times a day. With Instagram, maybe about 5 times a day or so. With Twitter, probably like 10 to 15 times a day, because you're just fighting through that noise. So posting often will help increase the chances that your congregation and the people that they want to invite or they want to share with are going to actually see what you have to say. And there are things out there that can help you with this. So if you're finding that you just don't have time to sit on the computer and post that stuff out all the time, there are automated systems that you can work with. Like a great one that I feel like a lot of churches could use is called Hootsuite. And you can set up automatic posts if you want to. So if you want to just share something like a quote or a verse, and you know that you're going to share it in the next couple of days, you can set up a schedule and have it post automatically for you. You don't want to do that all the time, because you want to make sure, as we're saying, that you're engaging your audience and that you're actually talking with them and not just being a one-way conversation or a vending machine just popping out different stuff. But the point of social media is to be social. And also you want to make sure that you're encouraging your church to use it. So you want to advertise to your church, hey, we have a Facebook page, we've got a Twitter page, we're on Instagram, whatever avenue that you utilize, make sure that your church knows about it so that they can find you, or they can look for you at least and come across it. All right, so moving on with digital platforms, another biggie is the website. Websites are very important today. You'll find that most people, when they're new to an area and they're looking for a church, they're not going to pick up the phone book. They're not necessarily going to ask their neighbors where they go. But most of the time, they're going to hop on Google or Bing or a search engine and start typing in to find churches in their area. And websites are fantastic because really what it boils down to is they're your silent salesperson, your advocate that's working 24/7, always accessible. People can come to your site and find out more about you. And a website is definitely essential, even in the scope of social media, which can still be found online. But a website allows you to tailor your site better to help you be found on searches that you actually want to be found on. If your Facebook page probably isn't going to be found unless someone is specifically looking for you, your church name, or something like that. Whereas perhaps if you're a Lutheran church in Colorado Springs, you can tailor your site with information and keywords that can actually say, something along the lines of, such and such Lutheran church in Colorado Springs. And that way, you'll be more likely to be found in search engines when people are looking for more general terms. So it's your silent salesperson. It's kind of like a billboard in many ways with a ton of information that you can put on there so that people really get to know who you are and learn more about you. And that's where the next point is, it allows you to tell your story. So a website, unlike social media, which is kind of like spurts of things that's happening and just trying to let people know stuff's going on, a website allows you to expound on that so much further, be able to write out your story, introduce yourself better. People can take more time on it and really research your church and make sure that it's something that they feel comfortable with. And even your members who are already in your church can go to your website and learn more and have options available to them. And I love the fact that it provides additional content, such as you can upload your sermons to your websites, you can run blogs, any detailed info that you want to provide that people are really looking for. And then the next type of platform, I have a feeling most of you probably don't have one yet. I could be wrong, and maybe I am, but a mobile app. Mobile apps are becoming increasingly popular within churches. And when you think about it, mobile popularity is actually growing to the point where mobile users online have surpassed desktop users. So now there are more people checking their email, going on the Google searches, checking out websites on their phones than there are people doing it from a computer, like a laptop or a desktop computer. So with that in mind, mobile apps are fantastic because, for one thing, they're specific to user interests. So unlike a website, which allows you to paint a much larger scheme of things and be able to tell more about your story, perhaps somebody who's already in your church isn't necessarily looking for that information, but they would like to see what happened with last week's sermon and listen to that. Or maybe they would just want to know, they like to follow along with a blog or devotional that the website has. Or they just want to know what's happening in the events. Or maybe they just want to go on and pay tithes real quick because they forgot to on Sunday, or their check came in and they just want to do it while they're thinking about it. So mobile apps allow them to have things that are more specifically tailored to them, that speak to them more clearly. And then also, it's more convenient. So again, just because it's limited to what they actually want to know or want to see, they can pull up the mobile app and be able to find directly those areas without having to go online and kind of wade around through it. Also, I love the fact that mobile apps provide a means of proactive communication, meaning that you actually get to speak to them. Websites are reactive. Essentially, somebody comes to the website and then they get to learn more about what the website, about your church from what the website has to say. But they have to initiate that action by coming to the website to begin with. A mobile app allows you to actually send out push notifications or communicate with them so that their phone goes off and tells them, like, hey, we got new stuff that we want to share with you. So that's really great. Also, the important thing about a mobile app is it allows you to gain real estate on your users' devices. So think about this real quick. A mobile device is used on average 3 hours a day by the average person. 3 hours a day, that's a pretty significant chunk of time. And you having real estate in there where people actually have a spot for your app on their device is a big improvement to allow you to stay in communication with them. So that's just another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at a platform like that. All right. So now another thing that I want to talk about is email. I fear that email is perhaps one of the most underused methods of communication in the church today. The thing with email is that almost everyone has one. Almost everyone has an email address, and if you're going to digitally communicate with them, then it's almost guaranteed that they do, because they have to have one to get online or have an account somewhere. So with an email address, it's important to have that information because almost everyone has one. It's a great way to stay, again, it's another proactive form of communication where you can send something out to them for them to check on. So with that, it's important for you to create lists for yourself. So set up lists, get together with get your church to submit their email address to you, whether it's like writing it down for you or going online and submitting it through like a mail system form or something like that where they can subscribe to your emails. There are different systems out there that we'll talk about here in a second that you can actually send out mass communication with email to and cater it towards the people who need to see it. So if you want to make something that's specific to your congregation's interest, just in large, then you can make a general email that goes up to them. But if you want to send out something like a special thing for volunteers to say like, hey, be sure we need volunteers for this event. So you guys are signed up for this. So anybody who can make it, let us know. So you can send something specifically to them, or you can send something specific to staff. There's different things that you can do to tailor that and make that a more effective means of communication. Also, looking at popular email marketing services that you can employ for the church, the first thing, one of the first services that I would recommend is MailChimp. I like MailChimp a lot. I use them for our church specifically because they have a free service where you can have up to 2,000 subscribers. And then also there's Constant Contact, which is another good one. And they kind of each just have their own pros and cons, different interfaces. You can try them both out and see, but these are great services. And these aren't the only ones out there, but these are a couple of them that I know have worked really well. And a lot of our members at Sharefaith have told us they use and really enjoy. So with that, the other thing I want to mention with email is that the average person checks their email about 15 times a day. So you have really good odds that if you send an email to somebody, they're going to see it. And I know personally, like if I get something from a church, that stands out to me against all the other junk mail that I get. But you can make sure that you cut through the noise and be able to have another form of communication that's more effective. Like I said, I just don't feel that churches use this enough or think about it as much as they should. And it's really one of the first things I would think of as a priority is to get email addresses of your people so that way you can talk to them. All right. Now here's another one that a lot of people are starting to use more, and it's kind of along the lines of what we talked about with Periscope and YouTube and those, and it's live streaming. So with live streaming, I love the fact that it gives you the ability to live broadcast anywhere. As long as somebody has an internet connection, they can go on and actually follow along with the service in real time. This is great for people who can't make it due to travel or illness or whatever the situation is. They can go online either to your website or to a special channel you've got set up somewhere or through a mobile app that's set up for it and be able to actually follow along and stay in touch with the service. So I wanted to bring Periscope back up for this because, again, Periscope is a great option that's recently come around. I love the fact that it's free. Again, I'm the kind of guy who just loves to be frugal, and I will look for the things that don't cost anything if I can. So Periscope's great that it's free. To my knowledge and researching it, there doesn't seem to be any way, there doesn't seem to be like limit for people who can watch it. So that's another great thing. So that's great. And then, also all it requires is just an iOS or Android device. So if somebody has an iPhone or an iPad or an Android tablet or phone, then they can go on, download the app, and then be able to tune into your channel and follow along with what you're saying. I love the fact that it's interactive. People can chat on there even, which is kind of cool. If you've got a bunch of people coming in and watching the service, they can all talk to each other like, oh, yes, pastor said a great point. Oh, I love that. Or did you catch what he said there? I kind of fantasize that because I teach at church sometimes too. But anyways, it's the idea that people can interact on there. They can tap on it to show hearts, to show that they're loving what you're saying and be able to promote it to other channels. So Periscope's really cool in that aspect. The cons about it are that you don't necessarily get all the most helpful feedback that you want as far as your reporting goes. And it's something that it does require a device usually in order to watch. So it's not necessarily the most flexible out there as far as people viewing it on, but they're going to continue to develop and grow, I'm sure. So that's something to watch for. And you might feel that what it does right now is sufficient for your needs. The other thing is that there are plenty of other live streaming services out there that you can look into. A lot of them, most of them, have fees, and so you kind of have to associate the cost and figure if it's something that you feel is a viable platform for your church right now, if people are going to utilize it at this point, or if it's just something to kind of keep in mind for the road, for down the road. So, but I just wanted to bring it up because I feel it's definitely a valid platform that people are making use of. All right, and then another form of digital platform. We're almost done here with these guys. But I just want to bring all these to your attention. Think about what you're doing for projection and screen media. So the stuff that you play at your church, whether it's your announcement slides that are running, or maybe you have a video that's running before the service that people can check out and see what's happening or coming up in your church. If you've got a PowerPoint running that your pastor's using, also videos that you just have throughout this different areas. So like if you're playing a video in the welcome, like in the foyer to welcome people or mention stuff that's going on. Think about that, and that's another form of essentially like a digital billboard, if you will, that keeps people in the loop as to what's happening. And you can use in your services, fellowship areas, anything like that. So with that, now I want to transition to print platforms. Print platforms, there's lots of these available to us as well. We often think that print is dead, which it's not. Really, print is one of the most helpful platforms I've found in terms of speaking to people inside and outside the church. One of the biggest tools, I think, in our arsenal to use for print marketing is our bulletins. I love the bulletins because with print, for one thing, you have a tangible item. Somebody can walk to your church, and then a greeter or anybody there can hand them something, put it in their hands and feel it, and they have something there to tell them about your church, what's happening. You can also include other helpful resources, like you can include your website address. You can list your social media handles and pages that they can follow along with, so you can kind of bridge them over into the digital communication to stay in touch with you through that. And I love the fact that you can do something that utilizes that utilizes bulletins and still makes them relevant for today. And they really are more relevant than a lot of people give them credit for. Another form of print media that not all churches will use, but still handy, are newsletters. Again, sometimes people just come to the church and then they see what's there. Newsletters are cool to have pinned up if your church is small enough at this point to do that. Bigger churches might not necessarily have newsletters pinned up anywhere, but it could also be something that can be handed out. And especially with congregation members that aren't as comfortable using digital devices or don't really rely on them as much, it's good to keep them in the loop somehow and have some sort of resource that they can still stay in touch. And along with print newsletters, email newsletters. Going back to kind of the stuff I talked about with MailChimp and Constant Contact and those kinds of services, having email newsletters, so stuff that goes out and people who do use digital resources still staying in touch and getting an update, maybe once a month or a couple times a month, however often you want to do it, so that they know what's going on at church and be able to keep informed that way too. I want to talk about making the most of your bulletins. So going back to these real quick. For one thing, keeping the theme running. So your bulletin's design is also very important. It can either be designed to be a general design that fits the feel of your church, maybe your church logo and colors and things like that if you use in branding at all. So keeping the theme running is important. Or a lot of people will actually have like a sermon series. So like if you have like a PowerPoint or something you use in the sermon series, creating a matching bulletin that fits with it, it just feels so professional when you walk in and you see like this example, like this bulletin here says "Be bold" and it has a scripture. So people come in, they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's probably they may think that's either a message or they know that that's going to be what your sermon is about." And then when they sit down, they see the PowerPoint that matches along with it. It just creates this idea of like, hey, the church actually knows what they're doing. Which working in the church, I know, is just a great feeling to have when somebody acknowledges that we know what we're doing. So, anyways, Mark's nodding his head, going like, "Yeah." So keeping the theme running. Also, I think one of the biggest helpful tools is using bulletin inserts and having the ability to advertise upcoming events with the bulletin, having new visitor cards. So people who are new visitors, giving them the option to provide more information about themselves so that if they want to stay in touch with what the church is going on. Also, allowing for note-taking, simple things that we have seen in a lot of times in church, but we don't want to take for granted as we progress into this kind of more digitally driven age. We still want to keep these things in mind of how important they are, and really they can still leave quite a big impact if we're using them correctly. Also, as I mentioned, connecting with your digital outreach. One of the things that has really come around, and I'm sure you've seen them everywhere, are things like QR codes or it's basically a barcode that your device can scan and be able to go straight to a link. So you could have one that goes straight to your website, or perhaps if you're advertising an upcoming event that's coming, like a youth camp, and you want to give them the option to register now for it, you can create a QR code that takes them directly to the page that you want them to see so they can learn more about that. And then also I want to talk about flyers. So bulletins and newsletters I feel like are great for inner communication. Flyers I bring up because they're great for outer communication, speaking in outreach and communicating with the world. If you have anybody who's going out into the public for any reason, whether they're going to evangelize, maybe they're going to volunteer in an event, and you just want to promote something that's happening at your church or promote your church in general, give them flyers to work with. It's great for specific events, nice big colorful designs, big text to talk about, this is what's happening. here's when, here's where it's going to be at, and then drive people that way too. Also, they have the ability to be placed around your community. So if you're trying to promote your youth program and you say want to talk to the school about letting teenagers at the school know that you have a student ministry and you want people to come to it, if they say it's okay, then you can post it up around the school in different places on poles and bulletin boards. As long as you don't annoy them and cause too much trouble for the janitor, I'm sure they'll be fine with it. But something like that, or going around town, and if you have an event coming up and posting stuff up in telephone poles or around the park or whatever, keep things like that in mind and be active in reaching out through whatever means available. Also, you can go pass out at other events like we talked about. This one is kind of towards the end, just something I still want to bring up, even though you may not necessarily see it as something you would use all the time, mailers. So mailers aren't necessarily used as heavily, although that's in many ways a good thing for people who are using them. And mailers could be something like a postcard or a flyer or booklet or something that's talking about your church or what's happening there. And I like the idea of a mailer because to me it feels a little bit more personal than getting an email or than just a lot of the digital avenues that are out there. When a church mails you a postcard today, that stands out. That's something where you can make a visual impact on them, that they can hold a postcard from your church. They might throw it away 5 seconds later, but it gives them the idea that your church is there, and that can be something where you can continue to try, especially around special events. A lot of churches will still do that, where around Christmas time or Easter, or people where they know when people are going to be looking for churches to attend for those events that may not otherwise come normally, you can promote it and then get them in the door, so that way you can minister to them more effectively. So mailers, don't knock them, don't throw them completely off the table, but just something else that you can think of at your disposal. And so we've talked a lot about different platforms. One of the questions I want to ask you guys is what kinds of digital platforms that you're utilizing now. Mark is going to throw up a poll for you, and we just want to see what you have to say. It's multiple choice, so don't get too stressed out about it. But anything that you feel that you utilize today, I want to hear what you have to say in it. So if you don't mind sharing with us, kind of if you've got a website, if you're using social media, whatever it might be, we'd love to hear what you have to say in the matter. So just for a couple minutes, I want to give people the opportunity to share with us. So, all right, getting the results in. And I'm definitely seeing a lot of you guys are using websites and social media. Awesome. I can see you guys are using screen media in your church. Fantastic. And all right. And still coming in. See, live streaming is definitely one of the things that isn't being used as heavily yet. That's fine. That's one of those areas that I think is really just starting to show up for churches. Also, I just want to apologize. Mark's brought it to my attention. We had some pretty poor connection, it looks like, at first. However, the recording should be better. If anything came up where you guys were having trouble connecting at the beginning, for those who are watching, we'll definitely include the recording so you can stay in tune with that and make sure to follow what's going to happen. We'll send that out in the next 24 hours. Good. Okay, so give it just a few more seconds here, and then we'll go ahead and close the poll and share with everyone. All right, I think pretty much everyone's voted on that. So let's see. We'll go ahead and see. I want to end the poll. And let's go ahead and share the results with everyone so they can see what people picked. So, okay, well, the good news is most of you have a church website, and that really is, I would say, one of the biggest tools at your disposal that everyone should hopefully have. So I'm glad to see that. And it looks like social media is a close second place with 89%. Social media is one of those things where it doesn't cost anything to use. And as I said, the biggest thing with it is maintaining it. But getting a social media presence established is a huge thing for churches to be able to communicate more effectively. Mobile apps, it looks like not too many folks have mobile apps yet. Again, that's a fairly newer platform that's come out that really not everybody is doing yet, but getting out there and having one is a big plus to people who are looking for something like that where they can easily connect with your church. So that's great. So now in terms of social media, I know only about, 89% of you said that, so it's a good number. I wanted to ask what kinds of platforms you're already using in social media. So if we want to go ahead and throw up that poll so that they can see it. So this just helps me kind of see where you guys are already at within the social media world and who's using what. I can see Facebook is already off to an amazing start of dominance, which is fantastic. So for anybody using social media, just what kind of stuff you're already making use of. Hey, we even have a few people using Periscope. That's awesome. It's cool. So good to see that that is starting to make a little bit of an impact where people are seeing something like that as a useful platform for their ministry. Right. Let's go ahead and see what the results are for that. And thank you guys so much. It's just we want to share this with everybody, let people know what's going on, and it's nice for us to see kind of what you're using too. So Facebook, by and far, the dominant factor when it comes to social media. And again, Facebook really is the biggest one. So it's great that you guys have a Facebook page. About 81 of you who are here with us today said that. I know there's lots more watching who didn't take the poll, so maybe you have that too. But it's good to know 100% of you guys answered and said Facebook. And then Twitter. And so that's the interesting thing. And I surprised me too, but Instagram now has surpassed Twitter. So I see a lot more of you have Twitter pages than you do Instagram. So I would say that that's something to look into and see how your church might be able to more effectively use Instagram within your services and with the social media ministry as well. And then YouTube and Vimeo. Hey, it's good if you can get recordings up and be able to record sermons, stuff like that, share that through those avenues. Those are really big things that a lot of people look forward to. I know we recently started recording our services. We were doing audio for a long time and switched to video, and a lot of people have said they really prefer it at my church. So that's something that I feel a lot of churches can really make a lot of use of. So thanks so much for answering the survey and looking at that. It just helps us to see where everybody's going with, and you can kind of see now what are areas that you might want to focus on and work on instead. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump forward back on the presentation here. All right, so the next part after our platforms that we've looked at, so tons there to look for. Hopefully you guys see some stuff that can spark your interest and take some time to research and look into here afterwards. But the next point I want to talk about with the remaining time we have, which we are getting very close to the end here, is progress. So we'll go through this really quick. Basic thing with progress we want to talk about is action and timing. There's two areas. Action and timing is one of them. So really, the first thing that you should do is figure out what the first thing you're going to do is. Decide on what your first phase is going to entail. What's it going to involve? Are you launching a social media campaign? Are you setting up an email list? Are you getting a website ready? Are you printing out flyers to put around your neighborhood? Whatever it is, figure out what that first priority needs to be and get started on it. Make your first steps in the next 24 hours. I'm going to challenge you all watching this because it's easy to talk about. It's easy to say, oh yeah, these are great ideas. Let's do all these things. But I want you to challenge to really start making progress towards something in the next 24 hours. So that way you have your foot forward and you're moving, whatever it is. Even if it's just you right now and you've got a team that you're going to work with, get the research done for them, put it together, call a meeting together. I can tell you calling a meeting together and getting a bunch of volunteers, if that's what you're working with, will be a long process. So make sure you're getting started with that right away. And also make sure that you're following up with people afterwards. So part of your action, not only getting the planning stages running and going, but get ready to follow up with people afterwards and build relationships, because getting them in the door is great, but the point is that you want to keep them there. You want them to feel that they can grow in your congregation, that they can be fed. A lot of people will say, and however you need to do that, through whatever avenue of ministry, look at ways that you can improve and make sure that you're following up and being intentional in your relationships with people so that they can have a stronger relationship with Christ. And also make sure that you're providing your visitors with opportunities to establish themselves. So a lot of times churches kind of play like a spectator sport in a lot of ways, but it's not really intended like that. I'm a firm believer in Ephesians 4:12, where it talks about pastors being called to equip the saints for the work of ministry. And I myself work as a youth pastor and director of education at my church. So I spend a lot of time when I'm putting together my sermon, lesson plans, and everything, and working with the other Sunday school teachers. That's a goal that we have, is we want our students, because that's who we work with, to be able to get involved somehow, even if it's just something like helping with greeting people or working with the smaller kids or whatever it may be. And likewise, for people who are coming into your church, giving them opportunities where they can somehow plug in and become more involved. Maybe they can get into a small group that you're hosting. Maybe they can, work as an usher there if they want to. You want to train them up and then give them opportunities to where they can follow through on it. All right, and then also another important part is measuring success. You can do all kinds of stuff, but if you're not actually keeping track of what's working and what's not, you're going to find yourself wasting a bunch of time on platforms that either weren't really worthwhile to get into, or you're just spending too many resources on something that you don't need to. You want to make sure that you're tracking performance for each one. For a website, digital platforms, websites, social media, that's easy. You can see how many people are sharing your Facebook posts. You can track visitors on your website with stuff like Google Analytics, which is a free service. And if you're not using Google Analytics or something comparable, it's great because it allows you to not only see how much traffic you're getting, but where they're coming from. Are they coming from search engine results? Are they coming from Facebook, Twitter, whatever? And then how are they navigating the site once they get there? What are our most popular pages? So all those things can help you when you're fine-tuning your platform and getting people in and working with that. And then also print platforms may be tougher to track sometimes. You can send out a bunch of flyers and people show up and you don't really know for sure if they actually are coming because they saw the flyer or what led them. However, I think that there are great ways that you can kind of create tracking. Like if you want to encourage people, like if they bring the flyer with them, then they get a free coffee from the coffee shop at your church, or perhaps they get something like a special new visitor packet to learn more about the church. You can do little things like that to encourage them to bring whatever it is that drew their attention to your church. That way you know what's working. And also you can determine something. The thing I'm trying to say is you can't determine something after just one time, how effective it is. If you do something once and then give up on it, well, of course it's not going to work out as well as you'd hope. You have to be consistent and persistent in how you're sticking with your platform. So if you send out an email campaign and nobody opens it, try another one. Try again. Don't give up. You have to make sure that you're following through on everything and you have plans to continually do that form of marketing for a while so you can accurately track how successful it's been in reaching other people for you. So make sure that you're not giving up after just one try on something. Don't just throw one Facebook post up and go, well, nobody liked it, nobody shared it. Well, put another one up. If your website, isn't getting the traction that you want, work on it, build it out, figure out what people are looking for that you can put on your website to draw them there. Share stuff from your website on your social media channels if that's getting more traffic so that they'll come to your website and learn more. Whatever it might be, you have to be thinking consistently of how can I further expand what I'm doing, and how can I continue to grow on this, and if it's not working, make it better. After a while, you might find that something isn't working. If mailers aren't gaining any traction and you don't see any benefit from them, don't do them anymore. But give yourself a good few tries to try and get them out there and really see if they really make any difference or not. So you have to think of what's going to really be beneficial for you in that sense and be consistent and persistent in how you do it.